Hello, so today we're going to go through the first of the how-to series, and we're going to be covering how to squat. So first of all, we're going to start off with just defining what is a squat. So a squat is a compound lower body movement, so working most of the lower body muscles, your quads, hamstrings, glutes. Also going to be working your back muscles, so especially your lower back and upper back is going to be stabilizing. So it's almost a full body movement that you're doing. So just to begin with, we'll go through some more technical cues just to performing the movement itself. So main things are, we're going to focus on a back squat. Obviously there's loads of different variations of squats, but most common one, barbell back squat. So your main technical cues, you're going to start off depending on what bar position you have. If you're in a high bar position, that's going to be on the top, on your traps, just up here. If you're in a low bar position, this is going to be more on your rear delts, just a bit lower. So the difference between those two positions, high bar is going to be more quad dominant movement. You're going to be more upright in the movement itself. As you come down, you're going to get more knee bend, so you're going to be working your quads more. In the low bar position, which tends to be what we call the powerlifting style squat, your hips are going to be further back, your torso is going to be further forward. So this is going to be more hip dominant, working the glutes, lower back a little bit more. So those main cues when you're doing the movement itself is you're going to be descending, driving the knees out, keeping the feet nice and flat and keeping your spine neutral, and then just coming up nice and strong out the bottom. Obviously doing that with the bar, any kind of weighted option. So a few things on the movement itself. You hear lots of different things about depth and how low to go in the squat. There's no exact answer for how low you should go. Best thing to think of is probably just go as low as you comfortably can. So if you can go all the way down as low as you can without losing any spine position, without having any knee pain or discomfort, that's great. If you can only get a little bit higher before you start to maybe have some pelvic tilt or any kind of pain, then there's no problem to squat a little bit higher. So, and just a couple of other things to note on that. You want your feet to be rooted into the floor, nice and strong, and you want to be bracing through your core just so your lower back is supported nice and strong all the way through the movement. So those, I would say, would be the main technical cues. So from there, move on, we're just going to talk about any common errors you might get when you're performing the squat. So first of all, we're going to talk about knee valgus. So this is when your knees come in on the way down, on the way up, more likely on the way up. So if you are having that problem with the knees caving in, it's probably just going to be a case of finding a different stance, maybe coming in a bit, going a bit wider, coming in a bit narrower, maybe turning the feet out slightly until you find that right position. So it's just going to be a case of trial and error. It could be potentially a muscle weakness somewhere, so making sure your strength is well-rounded will help with that as well. It might not be a terrible thing if you do have a little bit of knees coming in on the way up, but it is something you want to avoid in extremes. So second most sort of common error that you see would be what they call Backwink, which is basically a posterior pelvic tilt, which is when your lower back will sort of tuck underneath at the bottom. Easiest way to avoid this is to not go so low at the bottom, so don't feel like you have to get as low as you possibly can if you then are feeling that your spine is a little bit out of position. If you can just come up a little bit higher or find a comfortable depth. Alternatively, if you work on your mobility, then it's going to help you be able to get into that bottom position whilst maintaining a neutral spine, so a straight spine. Next most sort of common error that you'll see is going to be a lack of bracing through your core. So basically you want to be stable all the way through your core. This is just going to help protect your lower back. So when you're setting up in a squat, especially when you're doing heavier squats, you want to be taking a deep breath straight in, and you'll be just contracting all the way through your abs, all the way 360 around the outside through your lower back, keeping everything nice and tight so that you're in a good position, so you can do the heavy squatting without damaging your lower back. Best way to get better at the bracing is basically just practice, so just practicing bracing, and also it can be useful to wear a belt, so a lifting belt. That just gives you an external cue to brace against, just to help you with that. Other common error you're going to see is people doing what we would say ego lifting, so lifting too heavy, going too heavy too often, not spending long enough practicing on lighter weights, just trying to add weight to the bar every single time, end up sort of injuring yourself can be a bit of a problem. And then occasionally you'll see sort of missed cueing as well. So people will take things that aren't quite right, like you should be putting all your weight through your heels, or your knees shouldn't go over your toes, those kinds of things. You want to just make sure you do your research, avoid those kind of things that aren't going to help you with your squatting long term. So there's nothing wrong with knees going over your toes, and really you want to be putting all your weight through your midfoot rather than through your heel. So those, I would say, would be the main sort of common errors you're going to get with squatting. There'll be others as well, we'll just keep it to those. Lastly, we're going to just go over how to program. So how you program, the main two factors or three factors are going to be frequency, so how often you're squatting, recovery, so how you're able to recover from each of those sessions, and then volume, which is how much work you're doing overall throughout the week, throughout the month, and then throughout the years that you're training. How you factor those in will depend on where you're at in your training. So if you're a beginner, intermediate or advanced training. So for a beginner, you're gonna want to do high frequency, so lots of practice. You're not going to be as near to your genetic potential, so you're going to be able to do a lot more squatting without going near to sort of fatigue levels. So make sure frequency is high. You're getting a lot of practice in on lighter weights, getting your form right before you start to sort of pile on the intensity and the weight. In terms of recovery, obviously your squat is quite a big movement. You can move quite a lot of weight on that, so it does have its sort of recovery factors. It will lead to you getting fatigued if you're not taking care of how much work you're doing, especially when you move into intermediate advanced stage. And then lastly, so volume, which is how much work you're doing throughout the week. Volume is sort of key really, so you don't want to be doing high volume all the way through the year, maybe unless you're a beginner, but to sort of be wary. At some points you want to be pushing your volume up, so lots of squatting throughout the week. At other points, if you start to feel fatigued, you're going to want to drop that back a little bit. And then lastly, we'll just go over assistance exercises. So main thing here is there's nothing better than just doing more squats and more squat variations to improve your squat, because then you're going to be hammering the same movement pattern. So there's tons of different squat variations. You've got your back squats, which we mentioned, front squats, so where the bar's placed over the front. You can do that with dumbbells, kettlebells, all sorts as well. You've got pauses, tempo you can manipulate. There's all sorts of different things. Heels raised if you want to work on your quads and get a lower position. Other than squat variations, you're going to have any movements that are going to work the muscles that are working in the squat anyway. So quads, hamstrings, glutes. So if you're working your quads, things like leg extensions, hamstrings, hamstring curls, all those kind of RDLs. Basically strengthening the muscles that are going to be working in the squat movement itself is going to be helpful. But the key thing to take away, would be just more squats, more practice, more volume, until you become sort of stronger, and then just take more care with programming. So yeah, I think that is everything we're going to go through for today's one on how to squat.